So I'm going to talk to you about fairness and unfairness, especially at work. But before talking, I would like to show you something. So Cécile is going to help me. Thank you very much for your help. So you know that social psychologists usually they do experiments. They do experiments with people, with human beings. But for the sake of simplicity tonight, let's do an experiment with two glasses. So look at what Cécile does. Imagine that you're going to try to give some resources or some information or some feedback to somebody in order to work with him or her, in order to launch a product, and what happens? Well, it doesn't work so well. So now let's imagine that this person has another perspective, another way of looking at things, and now you can see that it seems to work better. So, and even it can, when you give something, some information, some resources, some feedback, it can even become the beginning of an exchange. And the person can even, communicate with you and give you some feedback again. Thank you very much, Cécile. So, when the glass is down, it's like when you feel unfairly treated, and nothing positive can happen because your mind is just closed. And when the glass is up, the world seems differently, and you can see the metaphor on these two images. You can see that when we feel unfairly treated, the world seems to be a place that is not so secure. Dangers can happen everywhere, and people usually they are more self-centered, and they don't really care about cooperation. And when the world, when you're unfairly treated, the world seems a secure place where you can breathe, you can take some fresh air, you can feel at ease, and you can engage in cooperation much more easily. So I'm telling you this. I'm showing you this with glasses. I'm telling you this about humans. But is it really something that is deep in ourselves? So yes. And it's not only something that we are really hardwired regarding fairness and unfairness and the way we react to it. And it's also something that we share with our cousins. You know our cousins? Capuchin monkeys. We have 98% of our genes that are in common with these monkeys, and especially the gene of fairness and unfairness is something that we have in common with these cousins, with the capuchin monkeys. And you may know Franz de Waal. He has done he has conducted some studies with some of these monkeys, and these monkeys love cucumbers. And when you ask them to do a task, and when you reward them with cucumbers, they just love it, and they accept to do the task again, and they feel fairly treated, and they accept to cooperate with you. But then, if they see that you give to another colleague, to another capuchin monkey, if you give to another colleague grapes instead of cucumbers, the problems begin. Because you may know that they prefer grapes rather than cucumbers. Even if they like cucumbers, grapes are much better. So when they see a colleague receiving grapes for exactly the same task, they don't want to cooperate anymore. They just don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. So they feel unfairly treated, and then they don't want to engage anymore in any work with you. So we are hardwired. This is very deep, the reactions we have regarding fairness and unfairness. And now let's talk about how human beings react. concretely in organizations. So I'm going to show you, to tell you about a few illustrations, a few examples. And these examples come from a study that I've conducted with a few of my colleagues, especially Marion Fortin from the University of Toulouse, who is an amazing researcher. And we have made some interviews with some executives in the whole Europe, and I'm going to tell you what they've told us. So first, let's talk about John. So John is an executive in a British company, and John is quite happy because John has just got the good news that he has another position next month in another department of the company. It's a good position with a salary increase. So everything is going well. But suddenly, John learns a news that is not so good. He has a bad rate. He has worked very hard during the whole year. There were 2 in his team instead of 3, so they did the work of 3, even if there were only 2. And an evening when he came home with his car, he was so tired that he fell asleep. He almost had an accident, and now he receives a bad rate. So he goes and sees his manager, and his manager says, "Oh, I don't care. You have another job soon, so what's the problem? Why do you come and bother me?" And that was true. He had another job. He had even a salary increase. So what was the problem? The problem is that he didn't sleep the whole night. And then he didn't want to, when he got the new job, he didn't want to work anymore with his former department, just because he felt unfairly treated. And you may think that it's irrational, but for him, it was something really, really hard to accept, because he just said, "Give me that damned rate, so that I can feel recognized." It's a matter of recognition, basically. So that's the first example that I wanted to share with you. But there are other examples that are quite different, and that you may think that they're also interesting. For example, let's talk now about Nikhil. So Nikhil is an Indian executive working in a bank, and Nikhil has worked, for 5 years in this bank. He's a high performer, and as a high performer, he expects to get a new job that is fulfilling for him. And he learns that a new job has been advertised in his company. So he sends his candidacy. And you know what? He was not asked to come for an interview. And the person who was recruited for this job was somebody coming from outside of the company. So, wow, he felt really, really bad. And he said to his manager, I don't know if I would get the job, but at least I would have liked to show my value, to try, just to talk about what I've done, and then they could make their decision. But they didn't even accept to receive him for an interview. So 6 months later, what happened? In fact, the guy who was hired, he didn't fit. So he was fired. And the job was advertised again. But Nikhil didn't want to apply again. He could have got the job, but he didn't want. Because he said, this department is kind of biased, and I don't want to work in this department. So he didn't really care anymore about the job. He cared about something else. He was so, unfairly treated that he preferred to leave the firm. He just left, and he found another job in another bank. Now, a last example, Cécile. Cécile is French, and she got a maternity leave, and then she came back into her company. And when she comes back, her manager doesn't talk to her anymore. So she doesn't understand what's happening, and in fact, her manager only wants to work with her direct subordinate. and doesn't communicate with her anymore. And during a few weeks, she doesn't have anything to do. And one day, her manager comes into her office. Her subordinate was in the same office as her at that moment. And, he does that, just as I'm doing with you. He just shows her back to her. And he talks to her subordinate directly. And what she felt was she said to me, wow, I felt like I didn't exist anymore. It was like a social death. So, of course, she went and saw her CEO, and she complained, and the CEO corrected the problem, but still something was wrong, and she decided to engage in an MBA, and after 1 year and a half, after she got her MBA, she chose to work in another firm at a higher level, and she didn't want to see this manager anymore. So these three examples are quite different, the one to the other, and in fact, they're illustrative of what we call the three types of injustice feelings that people can have at work. So these three types of injustice feelings have been discovered and identified by researchers since 1960. Many researchers in social psychology, organizational psychology, and also social justice work on these topics and have identified three ways of being unfairly or fairly treated. It works at work, but also in families, in love stories, with your kids. And so let's have a look at these three types of fairness or unfairness judgments or feelings. So first, you remember John. So John has felt what is called distributive injustice. So distributive injustice is the unfairness you feel when you don't receive what you expect on the basis of what you did. So which means that when you do something at work, you give a lot, you work a lot, you give a lot of yourself. So you want to receive something back. Can be a fulfilling job, can be a practical office, can be a good working conditions, can be money, can be recognition. But it's a kind of exchange. You give work and you expect something in exchange. And when you don't receive what you expect, this is the first kind of unfairness that you can feel. So John hasn't got the rate he expected. That could be a recognition of the work he did, and so he felt unfairly treated. So it's a matter of distributive justice. It's about the allocation. It's about what you receive. The second example, you remember Nikhil. It's a kind of different example because Nikhil at what point in the process he didn't really care anymore about the job. So it's not about receiving something. It's not anymore about the allocation. It's about the process. It's about what's called the procedure. So this kind of unfairness is called procedural unfairness. So it's not the decision by itself that is at stake. It's the way the decision is made. And so the way the decision is made, in this case, was quite unfair for him. And he felt unfairly treated because he couldn't have a voice in the process. He was not able to show his value. And the last example, it's the third way people can be unfairly or fairly treated at work. It's called interactional justice. So interactional justice is just the fairness or unfairness of the social interaction. So how do you feel how Cécile felt when her manager didn't want to talk with her anymore, didn't respect her anymore. So it's a matter of respecting people when you work with them. So when you have these three types of justice and injustice in mind, you have the whole grammar of justice feelings at work. The point is that these three types of justice feelings or judgments, we say judgments when we want to emphasize the fact that it's a cognition. We say feelings when we want to emphasize the fact that it's an emotion. And in fact, it's both at the same time. So I've done some research with a few colleagues. For example, Russell Croponzano, we published a book which shows that justice is an emotion, even much more than a cognition. In fact, it's a little bit of both. So the consequences. You have 3 kind of consequences. And this is a research that, for example, a study conducted by Robert Folger and Daniel Skarlicki, University of Central Florida and University of British Columbia, showed that there is an interaction between the 3 types of justice feelings that we showed together, that I showed to you. So first, if people feel fairly treated, if the 3 types of fairness are at a high level, people usually cooperate. Now, when at least one type of justice is very low, either you feel unfairly treated regarding the process, the procedure, or the distribution, or the interaction, then people engage in negative behaviors. Usually, this just means that they do a little bit less. For example, the phone rings at 5 p.m., they don't answer, it's the end of the day. So, they don't do anything more than their job description. But they can also just leave the firm and quit and go and work somewhere else. But the most interesting is that when the 3 levels of justice judgments are very low, when you feel unfairly treated procedurally, distributively, and interactionally, then the problems begin. So, antagonistic behaviors are usually what people engage in this case. So, for example, when you have theft at work, when you have sabotage at work, usually managers think that it's a matter of personality. We have some people who are bad, bad apples in a good basket. But what research shows is that, in fact, most people react in this way when they feel unfairly treated on the 3 dimensions. So it's an explanation that is quite different from the explanation that puts personality first. And now what can we do? What can you do as a manager, as a father, as a mother, as a lover, or as a friend? What can you do when people feel unfairly treated so that they don't engage in negative behaviors? So some research that I've done, for example, with Russell Croponzano, University of State Colorado, shows that there are different ways of correcting unfairness. And first, of course, you can be distributively fair, and this can correct even unfairness on different dimensions. Even if the unfairness is interactional or procedural, you can correct it. You can at least compensate some unfairnesses if you treat people well distributively. So we have done some research that we have also we have found an effect that is called the Robin Hood effect, and this shows that managers can even become Robin Hoods. So they give even, for example, 3 days off to compensate for some injustices. And so the idea is to reward people in accordance to what they did. The second way of behaving is to give voice to people. So when you make a decision, you can give voice to people before the decision is made. And this is very good, even if you don't take the decision that people want you to take. If they just have an input before the decision is made, they will think that the process is fair. Of course, you cannot manipulate people in the long run. You have to be sincere. So you have to give voice and listen to the voice that people give you. And finally, interactional justice seems the most the easiest way for people, the easiest way to be fair. It just consists in communicating with empathy, respecting people, But that's not so easy, especially in hard times, because you need to have emotional stability in order to be respectful and in order to communicate with empathy. But this can be done, and people can be trained to that. So when you try at least to be fair regarding one of these three dimensions, then it's like using a social glue that helps people to feel well and to agree to cooperate with you. So it's a good basis then to launch projects together, to launch a business, or to do something in cooperation. So thank you very much.